Hello, San Jose! Woo! All right. Okay. No, Thursday night, you guys are out here. I really appreciate and am honored by the fact that you invited me out here to talk about this subject that I'm totally passionate about, and I hope that I can help impart some of that passion to you. I think TAPICC is a really important initiative that's all about the best interest of the entire language ecosystem. An industry, by the way, that I think has a really important mission. We have all this technology that we're surrounded by, all this amazing innovation that's benefiting like the world, and it's not okay that there would be a barrier to access to that because of language, right? So I know a lot of you are in the localization and language industry, and I want to say first and foremost, I think the work that we're doing in the language industry is extremely important, right? It's about being able to ensure that all the best that humanity has to offer is accessible to all of humanity. So I first want to thank you for being at IMUG and being in the industry. Yes. Oh gosh. Okay. Maybe I will just do a stand. Okay, is that better? Is that good? Okay. So, all right. Okay. So just in terms of order here, I'd like to introduce myself, introduce Gala a little bit, and then get to know you guys a little bit. I don't think we'll have time to do introductions of everyone, although that would be hilarious. Talk about what TAPICC is and why it's important. Get into the details of what we've done with TAPICC so far, and then talk about how you can get involved with this. And then I would say let's chat. But honestly, I would say if it's Thursday evening. Like, sometimes standards can get kind of dry. I would prefer this to be interactive, right? So if you have anything that you would like to ask or don't understand, just raise your hand. We'll get you a microphone and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so that's pre-bearded me. I'm almost quarter century in the localization industry, which is not as old as IMUG, which is super impressive. IMUG is a 30-year-old industry. For, I would say, at least the last 5 years or so, I've been really focused on the space where CMS meets with TMS, or let's say the world that manages the creation of content and the world that has to do with the making of that content to be international. I currently work for RWS Moravia. We have a new partnerships program, and my mission there is to build robust ecosystems of technology and services around our clients' global programs. And it's directly relevant to TAPICC, as we'll see here. So Gala, maybe a quick show of hands. Who is familiar with Gala? Wow, okay. Can I ask who is a member of Gala? We got a few, okay, or one, that's great, two. So Gala I would encourage you to look at Gala. They're a non-for-profit trade organization having to do with the language industry, and they do annual meetups, conferences, and then they have webinars, and then they sponsor projects like TAPICC. So it's really interesting because you'll meet people that maybe even your competitors, but it's a space where everyone is really collaborating to float the boats of the entire industry. And Gala sent me out here to do this. So thank you to Gala for sponsoring my trip to come talk to you this evening. They are the foundation of the TAPICC initiative, which constitutes basically 3 pillars. The first is the legal framework. The second is the community engagement. So the recruiting of people who should be part of the initiative. And then I would say the third is tactical, right? Our actual collaboration infrastructure. This is all sponsored by Gala. So I would like to, at this stage, get like a sense of the room and who you guys are. So I'd like to ask, who represents a content management system, a digital asset management system, or some kind of similar technology having to do with the creation of content? No? Okay. Who represents a translation management system, a CAT tool, or something of that nature? Okay. Who's responsible for, let's say, that content that's created, that you're responsible for, that it gets localized? Okay. Who is actually doing the localization of content? Okay. Okay. Okay, system integrators? Okay. Can I ask, what did I miss? Because I feel like there's a big gap here. Yeah, what did I miss? Students. Okay, All right. Well, no, that's great. Can I ask you, as students, what you're studying, are they related to one of these sort of things? All of it? That's great. So you're sort of see it as a holistic problem. That is fantastic. That is great. Okay. Okay. All right. So TAPICC. So I want to give you a history of, because I think the why, you can't really understand the what until you understand the why. And there's a brief history that I'm going to try and drop on you here. Okay. So in the mid to late 90s, and it might have been earlier, but this is when I noticed it, there was a divergence between content management practices and translation management practices. So these two worlds of the space where content is created and managed and the space where it's made to work everywhere in the world, they sort of focused as their own specialties. And in the middle there was created something that I call the CMS-TMS gap. Okay, this gap, you've seen this gap or felt this gap as a form of pain if you've ever had to ask the question, how do I translate this content that I'm managing within my content management system? Is anyone familiar with this pain point? Has anyone felt this? Okay, it's something that's fundamental, but strangely not a solved problem necessarily all the time. Well, folks did come up with a solution to the problem, which is, hey, let's take these systems and let's integrate them using APIs, right? Let's use an API of a system and let's facilitate automation between the process that this system manages and the process that this other system manages. So let's say the content system and a translation system. Okay, so that's great, right? Okay, now here's the challenge. When you have this sort of organic solving of a problem, is the audio okay with this, or am I doing this all wrong? I feel like it's popping kind of a lot. Should I put it down further? Okay. Sorry. Okay. Better? Is that better? Okay. So this was a world that I've actually helped create this problem, okay? Every system that you might want to interact content between two different systems that do different things, we would create connectors for these. And you had this proliferation of basically point-to-point proprietary integrations between two different systems, which is sort of the state of the union today, okay? Why is this not great? Okay, we call it sort of the Wild West of API integrations. In a nutshell, the more each one of these lines here represents something that has to be developed, right? Something that has to be invested in to actually make work. And the more of those you create, the more cost is spent on something that has nothing to do with the actual localization of content, right? It's spent on waste. So you could say, all right, well, this is a necessary cost of business. However, it's not if each one of those is different, just different enough, right, to where your investment in this line is not usable, you know, or at all repurposable for your investment in this line. I guess what I'm sort of making is a broad case for standardization in general, right? Anytime that you have a system that relies upon integration of different systems, and that's being done differently for no good reason, that is really the definition of waste. And for my customers, that really represents like, oh, if it's a loss of operational freedom, right? Like if some new cool capability comes along that we would like to employ into their program, to create another one of these things represents a cost. And here's really the big problem with this, right? Sometimes these costs can be so much that it will tilt the scales in the favor of, I guess we don't do this at all then, right? So there is 100% the probability that there is content out there that has been made inaccessible to the rest of the world because the cost was too much because of this waste. So this should be, are we all in agreement that this is our enemy? I just want to get like a show of hands. Does everyone agree? Have I made that case? Okay, not everyone? That's okay. All right. All right, I will ask you to challenge me on your doubts about this, all right? Okay, so here, the idea of TAPICC is to take all this variation and boil it down into what is actually common, right? What does not need to be different, and to standardize it, to create a center of gravity by which the method in which one system communicates with another system to move around content through a process of localization can be standard, right? So that's the nutshell of TAPICC. Someone had brought up I think it was Wojtek had brought up this analogy of Mark Knopfler, and I'm using someone else's story because I'm not really familiar with Mark Knopfler, but I'm going to say like Jack White, all right, is able to go into on any stage and plug in his guitar into any amp, right? And he doesn't have to have a custom amp or a custom cable made, right? This is the sort of the invisible power of standardization. Okay. Okay, TAPICC, it stands for Translation API Cases and Classes, with cases being the cases by which content is moved through processes, and then the classes being API classes that reflect that and serve that. It's totally open, volunteer-driven, pre-standardization initiative, and by that, by pre-standardization, that means things that when the project bears fruit, this fruit can then go on to become an actual formal standard. It is focused on the localization process. So just as a scope, it's not an attempt to be a CMS. It's not an attempt to be a TMS. And one of its principles is that it's workflow agnostic, right? It's not dictating a workflow, but it's meant to facilitate a standard way of supporting a workflow. So here's a collection of benefits. I'm not going to read everything, but in a nutshell, its value again is to be this center of gravity for processes that everyone agrees need to be supported, so that when technology and processes are developed around that, people don't have to start from scratch, right? Okay, so I'm going to start getting into some of the, I guess, nitty gritty of the project and how it's organized and its status at this stage. Any questions? Is everyone with me? Okay, all right. Okay, so the initiative is organized into 4 tracks. The first has to do with automating a supply chain. So I would say if we think about a classic model where projects are moved, localization is handled in the form of a project. Track 1 is about that, trying to be able to model the classic handoff of a project from let's say a content management system to like an LSP to a translator, whatever that process would look like. If it's project based, this is the focus of track 1. Track 2 gets interesting and is just starting up. This is about, instead of projects, let's go into content at the unit level, and let's standardize the way content is exchanged between systems when it's at the granularity of like a segment, right? The third tracks, which haven't been started yet, so I can't talk about them too much, but track 3 is about adding richness to content with metadata. And then track 4 is about being able to facilitate context of content through a representation of what it would look like when rendered. Okay, so we have been working on track 1. Track 2 is ramping up. And just a quick tip, some folks, there's also 4 working groups. So the working groups are not the same thing as the tracks, right? You'll see the syntax like WG4, that's the working group, and you have to pay attention to which track it's in. The working groups are meant just to divide up the work of the track into manageable chunks within the teams. Okay, so we'll talk about track 1 in more detail. It still sounds not great, right? I keep like moving it up closer to my face. Sorry. Okay, right there. I wonder if I can pin this on my. Sorry. Or does that sound okay? Oh, that's how it's supposed to work. Okay.
And it's very fashionable.
I think it's, yeah, I like that. Read the manual. Here we go. All right. Oh, that sounds, yeah. Woo! All right. My arm is free. All right. Okay. So here are the working groups for track 1. And remember again, track 1 is about projects, like sending big containers of work through a supply chain. Work group 1 is about the metadata, business metadata that would be associated with a project. Work group 2 is about payload. So questions like what should be the relationship between the metadata and the payload, and should different tasks have different types of payloads? What are the type of payloads we want to support? A lot of these groups are just based on big picture questions, like what do we need to be able to support? Work group 3, like XList, what is that doing here? I'll explain this in a second, but XList, in terms of, who's familiar with XList here? Everyone. Okay, so XList is a standard around bytext, right? And the idea is that when you're talking about an actual translation activity, when you're trying to create a pairing between two languages worth of content, that XList should be the standard for that. And XList 2 has features that are able to support things that weren't otherwise possible. So this is one of the principles of TAPICC, is that language activities will take place through XList. It will use XList. Work group 4, this is the group that I co-chair. This is really where everything that's been dictated in the other groups get modeled in the API specification. So we can talk about that in some other slides. Yeah, so one of the principles is with TAPICC is not to create more standards to compete with other standards. We very much want to take the standards that are out there that we think are viable and pull them into the TAPICC standard. So XList is one of them. Linport is another one. We'll discuss that. Yes, so that's one of its principles. Don't create competition against other standards. Okay, so where we are thus far, work group 1 has come up with a set of task types and a glossary of localization terms. And the task types is pretty interesting in that the thinking is to have these standard types of tasks and parameters associated with those tasks that collectively you can model any type of workflow that you would do within a localization workflow. They're basically done. There is asks of this group and all the groups that we'll go over in some of the next slides. Work group 2 has come up with some guidance that we can talk about in a subsequent slide here. Right now they're looking at aligning with some of the recommendations coming from the Linport initiative. Work group 3, which if we're going to standard on XList as the format, as the payload that gets exchanged when we're talking about a translation type task, or essentially a multilingual task, then you need to be able to produce XList in a way that's standard, right? This has been a challenge with XList in the past, is that even though it's a standard, there was enough variation in the standard that people would produce XList that essentially was not compatible between systems. I've run into this myself. So the idea of work group 3 is to help that through best practices of actually creating XList. They have a document that has to do with producing and merging XList that is actually being submitted to OASIS as an OASIS standard. So this is an example of where a pre-standard can then go on to graduate into an actual standard. So yeah, I put a bullet here that we still need to support the community with real-world extraction problems. Even though they have this document produced, really where all the hard work is done is taking the best practices and actually putting them into actual practice. So if you're interested in XList, this is a place where Working Group 3 would still appreciate support. And then Working Group 4, we have a REST spec in Swagger format that's available on GitHub that you can look at and comment on. There is actually an active discussion right now about data model, and I'll talk about the data model here in a second. Yeah, this is good, right? We're trying to make a data model that, I mean, if you think about what we're trying to accomplish here, it's kind of remarkable, right? You have this world of CMS systems, this world of TMS systems, and they all have different worldviews. We're trying to come up with a data model that is usable for everyone, where they can exchange content, even though they might think like, oh no, the world is not based in content. The world is based on tasks. This is the level of discussion that we're having now. Like, what's the relationship of tasks and jobs to content versus content to tasks? It's good. So we're also writing prose deliverables for that. And if anyone is interested in contributing as an author or editor, we're looking for support there. And then this is an important one. If you have a system that you would like to be able to utilize TAPICC to either have other systems talk to you through TAPICC, or you would like to be able to communicate to other systems that use TAPICC, we're looking for people that host or that have systems that would be part of this ecosystem to take a look at our specification and you know, even as a thought experiment, answer, would I be able to use this with my system? So people who could put it through the rigors of, you know, would I use this? I think we're looking for that sort of support. So Workgroup 1, here are the basic task types that they've come up with. I would ask this question of the room. Is there anything missing? Like in a, yes.
You've got a microphone next to you, Mel. Right next to you.
Sorry.
Next to you, right next to you. Because I knew we were going to ask you the first question.
I know, and I didn't do my job. I was not supposed to let anyone answer unless they had a mic.
That's okay.
How did you get that so quickly, by the way?
Because I knew Merle.
Did he throw it?
That's too funny.
Oh,
is it on? Yeah, it's on. Okay, so I'm actually working on the ASTM group that's doing the update of multidimensional quality metrics. So I don't see quality metrics up there. I'm assessing the quality of translations and even original text. So I don't see that box.
Mm-hmm. Maybe
I see content creation.
It's
not assessment. It's not quality assessment. I don't see that.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay, we will bring that feedback back to Working Group 1. So thank you. Yes. Yes.
Let me. I was going to leave the other mic next.
These are very broad. Localization, for example, means all sorts of things.
Sure.
So you've got graphics, you've got all kinds of.
It's a superset of tasks for sure.
So if you're going to ask if this is complete, it seems like it's really hard to know.
It's an unfair question. Yeah. So and really, I think you can only answer that, I think, when you see what are the parameters associated with this, because the real question is, can you model the work that you're doing today with some proprietary integration? Can you model it with this? So sorry, unfair question. But yeah, no, that's great though. I like the question, where is QA? And I think the idea is that it's part of checking, that this would be, you'd be able to model any kind of like LQA task through checking, but I will check with the Workgroup 1. So this, we just have some links. I'll check, and I think we'll make the deck available after this session so people can have it and actually have access to some of the links that we're talking about here. excuse me, working group 2, their conclusions have to do with payload being related to the task type. And I think most importantly, if that payload is translation oriented or is related to bilingual text, then the payload is XList. But this group is interesting because we have some joint members with this and the LinPort initiative. So, which I don't actually, I can't speak to, but the idea is that all of the good advice from the LinPort initiative will be reflected in working group 3, or sorry, working group 2. Yeah, working group 3. If you've ever had to produce XList, check out the document and see if this jibes with your view of how things can go wrong and how they can be resolved. And then work group 4, which I can talk about because I'm part of this. Just in general, the idea of the exchange is that you have 2 different systems. Any system, one of the systems has to be a TAPICC host, but it doesn't matter what class of system that is. It can be a CMS system, it can be a TMS system. We're totally assuming that in a chain you have CMS systems, TMS systems, maybe other TMS systems, and any one of those can act as the host. But in general, one is sending work to another, and so the standard pattern is that you're sending a job, you're checking to see if a job is done, and then you're retrieving that job. The data model is under debate right now, but in a nutshell, the idea is that you have work, bodies of work, and some sort of content, right? That content has a relationship to the work. It could be a reference to the work. It could be what's fed to the work, the thing that needs to be changed, or it might be the result of that. So it's creating that ontology. That's what we're sort of debating right now. But the idea is that, yes, question.
So on the previous slide, all of the arrows go in one direction. And maybe a modern system, you would send a job, and when the job is processed, you get a notification and things come back to you. You don't have to keep polling for it.
Yeah.
Is that one of the
we have
options
a webhooks feature, right? So so that you could have the other system contact the other system. This
and notify the client.
Yeah. So this is one. You're right. This is one pattern. It's not like the. I think it would be. I'm trying to look at that because I did this. So I'm like, I drew this. So why did I do it one arrow only? Yeah, we could model that probably to show that it can be a bidirectional communication.
And a lot of enterprises, I don't know about a lot, but some enterprises now do translation through multiple tasks where we'll use machine translation, you'll do translation memory, you'll do native translators.
Yes. Okay, we're going to talk about that. That's a track 2 notion, right? So this track 1 is very much about like a classic project-based sending something in big chunks as a project defined. I mean, a lot of work is still done that way, right? But I think track 2 gets really interesting because that's when we're talking about actually enriching content at the enriching, because that's track 3, but being able to exchange content between different systems at the more granular segment level. Is that am I representing what you're talking about?
I thought so, but it's a little bit
But okay,
broad. So-
that's fine.
And the job, is that one language, or is a job multiple languages and then being
Yeah,
distributed to?
this is where it's all under debate right now. Like, what constitutes a job versus a task, right? Is a task a relationship of one language times, is a task a source times one output, or is a task all of that? We have several revisions of the data model, because here again, different CMS systems and different TMS systems that we're trying to be compatible with all have slightly different worldviews as to how that works. So you can look at you can check out where we're at, like on GitHub, and see if it. I would love to have input on that. Like, if you think it's if this would work for like any sort of work that you do today. So yeah, you can check out our Swagger document. This is quite old, so it's been updated. It's been pretty actively updated based on public review. Okay, so track 2. So this is exchange on the unit level. So, and this would be between, for example, a TMS system and maybe an MT system, or a QA system, right? Some system that is operating on a specific bytext unit. David Phillip is trying to promote this as like I guess like a call to arms. Gerard Taboo, which is stands for JLIF REST API for real-time exchange of bit text unit. I don't know if it rolls off the tongue, but it helps explain what is this. How is track 2 different from track 1? It's track 2, Gerard Taboo. Gerard Taboo, let me hear you say it. All right. I thought it sounded a little like a Star Wars character, maybe. Okay, so if you're confused as to the difference between track 2 and track 1, track 1, supply chain automation, it's about sending content between different organizations, or it could be between different agents, although track 2 can exchange content between different agents. Track 2 is, and where track 1 is asynchronous, track 2 is real-time synchronous transactions between systems. So I think we have a couple of examples here. So maybe a TMS system communicating to a translation editor, or a TMS system and another TMS system that happens to be applying some different value to the value chain. A TMS system and an MT system. I think the thing that's missing here is maybe a TMS system and a QA system. So at any time that you would want to take a segment and add some value to it through a process that's not in the system that you're talking about, right? We need some way to be able to exchange these segments between these systems. So there's for your reference. Okay, how to get involved. All right, if you're interested in track 1, you can provide feedback to the deliverables thus far. You can help with finalizing the API. So this is my team. You can work on a reference implementation, or even just work on that as a thought experiment. The idea is that track 1, we would have consensus and finalized deliverables by Gala Munich, which is in March, late March. And track 2 just kicked off at TCOM, which I think was yesterday. And so we're looking to, I think there's one working group. We're looking to have volunteers that are part of working group 1. That starts off with just like, I feel like that's the fun stuff, right? You get to write use cases. You get to say what you think the standard should do. And if you're going to be at Gala Munich, there's going to be some meetings specifically about Track 2. Who's going to be at Gala Munich? Ah. Okay. Well, there might be folks online, right? Okay. To join TAPICC, you don't have to be a Gala member. You should be a Gala member anyway, but you don't have to be a Gala member. You do have to have a Gala account, but that's free. You can set it up with this process here. You can search for there are these groups called Connect groups, and you can sign up for them. And there's some like legal process you have to go through to join, but once you join, then you have access to all the communication that's on the group. You have access to all the assets that you can review. So, and if you are representing like a parent company, you may need to talk to your legal department and make sure that you're that they're cool with you being a member of the TAPICC group. Oh, yeah, that slide probably does not need to be on there. And thank you very much. These are here's the main TAPICC page that you can find resources having to do with having to do with the project and how you can join. I think that's it for me. Was that time? With time? Is that okay?
This is good.
Do you need me to do it again?
Let's do it over.
No.
Yeah, we got more. We want to spell out every single initialism and.
Yes.
But I'll tell you what. The first student that has a question, a good question, gets this Adobe branded backpack. So, but it does need to be a question. But and it could even be, what does XList stand for? I don't get. Okay, there we go.
Told them what questions it had.
No, you don't get that one. Okay, here you go.
Thank you.
And this.
Hi, thank you for your presentation.
Oh, thank
I'm
you.
wondering what is some of the feedback that you've gotten from the TMS and CMS side, and also from some of the competitors whose job is to create the
great question. Yeah, it's tricky because with an initiative like this, I think most people are sort of like in a wait and see mode, right? They're like, yeah, I will support this standard if it takes off, right? So there's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation there. I think I've definitely had specific entities where I've asked, like, will you support this standard? And they just won't answer the question. So which to me is very much a wait and see sort of thing. This is interesting, right? Trying to have a standard like this. I would argue that almost no one benefits from this friction. Like no one truly benefits from this, right? Like all the money that you could spend building a proprietary connector is still money that could be spent on something, right? So, I mean, maybe that's naive, but like I feel like this is something that if you're a translator, this represents barrier for you to being able to do work that would otherwise be available to do. Same thing for LSPs, right? Like we don't benefit at all from this kind of industry friction. It's money that the customer spends that could be spent more on their business outcomes, right? So we don't benefit from it. If you're a TMS vendor, right, you basically have to invest in. I should have shown this slide. Have you guys seen that amazing Where's Waldo slide of all the marketing systems in the world? I should shown that one. It's amazing. It's this super dense landscape showing all the different CMS systems that are out there. If you have to try to connect with those, and your job is to build integrations for those, you've spent your budget for the next 1,000 years, right? So, and if you're a CMS system, this is really important. If you're a CMS system and there's a barrier between your content and that content being made accessible to everyone in the world, right? That's a huge problem for your content management system, right? You have an interest in making sure that you can say to people who are buying content management systems or digital asset management systems, our system will enable your efforts to be shared with everyone across the world. So I really have yet to find anyone who benefits from the friction, but I think that's the feedback that some people are super passionate about it and are participating, and I think that's great. And then I think some people are just sort of wait and see. I've not had anyone yet say, this is not a good idea. I don't think anyone has ever said that yet. So did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Except probably for the companies that make the APIs. Like whose job it is to create the API.
That they get some money for each one of those strands that is created.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like a system integrator or something, maybe?
Yeah, like a private company.
Can we get you a microphone? You have an answer.
To repeat the whole.
Yeah, please repeat.
Okay, third time. Hope you get it this time, Nika. I don't know if anyone would agree with me, but I think that the cost of building and creating APIs is usually eaten by the tool manufacturer who usually wants to get the client. It's not like a special business. It's just usually like a collateral cost of getting a client. It's my impression. I don't know if I'm right. I don't know if you have anything to say to that. May I ask a question, actually? I wanted to ask you a question about a little bit of your terminology. When you say
Sure.
payload, I know that's a spaceship
Yeah.
term. What do you exactly mean? And
Yeah.
specifically, you were talking about payload and I think pricing type. Or
That's
some
been a question, actually, an active question in the project. What do we mean by payload? The way I interpret payload as being that which is not metadata about the transaction, right? So the actual thing that needs to be changed as part of the transaction, but it also sometimes maybe means like reference material, as well, like binary content that would be sent along with the transaction that is not the that's not the metadata about the project.
Okay, then another question: what exactly in your mind metadata, business metadata?
Yeah,
'cause maybe we also have different definitions.
Sure. I guess like if I look at a typical project that we would receive from a customer, right? The payload would be an XList file, right? And the business metadata is things like, what's the name of this project? When is it due? Right? What's its what's the assignment? What is it? What are we supposed to do with it? Right? So that's but these are all the work of the project trying to define that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I was wondering to what extent TAPICC has managed to get buy-in or interaction from members of the CMS community, because obviously, like, drawing a circle around all the different definitions of project and job is very hard. But at the end of the day, we're ultimately trying to get data in and out of those systems. And, like,
it starts with that, right?
And we're like a little
exactly
outpost of civilization, and the CMS vendors are like beasts in the forest, sort of waiting to prey on us.
Yeah, well, we visited the Gilbane conference earlier this year in an attempt to basically sort of try to evangelize the concept to the CMS community. And I would have to say this is a good point. We're missing that representation actually in the project itself. The majority of people that are participating with TAPICC are in the localization industry, which is, it's super cool. That's great, but it's like we really need to have the support of the CMS industry. Yeah. I know that, was that a flaky answer?
No, I just
No.
was wondering, I mean, that's always been a problem of this industry in general. Like a lot of the problems with early like if you look at XList, like people who write CMSs produce, they generally just put it all in C data and kind of screw it up. And like, that's because we don't do a good job of outreach either.
Totally. I think that's like one of the points of working group 3, right, is to really like make that easy, right? So if you have to implement an XList creation in your CMS system, let's give you all the tools to do that. And I think that moving forward, working group 3, instead of just providing the advocacy, is going to be hands-on. Here, let's help you create this XList producer for your system. So, but no, it's a super important point, right? Yeah, and there isn't anything that says like every single CMS producer has to adopt the standard, right? There may be third parties that have to do with like creating, aggregating content out of a CMS. I mean, I think there's opportunity for entrepreneurs to build some system that basically gets content out of these, like a universal connector model, right? That would get content out and send it in TAPICC's language. So, yeah, because yeah, the CMS industry is super diverse, right? So, yeah.
So I don't even want to think about what time it is in Barcelona.
Yeah.
But, Yuka Nakasone has typed a question in there.
Oh,
How many connectors are recognized by this initiative, out of curiosity?
ooh, how many connectors? So, I mean, most connectors are proprietary connectors, right? So it's an interesting question. What becomes of all the existing proprietary connectors? I would think that they ultimately get replaced by standard TAPICC connectors, right? Because people don't want to continue to invest in developing proprietary connectors. So 5 a.m. Oh my goodness. Are you, Yuka, are you getting up, or are you waking up, or are you almost going to bed? Or do you not sleep?
Globalization director, she does not sleep.
Waking up, okay. Well, that's not horrible. Thank you for joining us this early. That's
And she woke
amazing.
up at 3 a.m. is what she did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yuka, did we answer? Did it? I'm making you responsible for my answers. Good.
So,
Thank you.
I'm a little surprised by the difference between your, I guess you called it track 1 and track 2. Do you have a diagram of the models you can support? It seemed like the way you expressed it, and maybe it's just because this is introductory, that that you're trying to do a single model rather than trying to absorb all of the possible models and being able to represent those. In other words, having one way of doing things, which is not really going to apply very well to most companies because they're almost all unique in some ways that they configure processes and the like, versus taking a survey of all the different things that people do and having some more generalized, abstracted version. And then, so you should be able to do everything and not have to keep customizing as you go forward because somebody's come up with a new one.
A new way of working. Yeah, I mean, so I think there's a couple questions in there. So in terms of use cases, right? We basically surveyed everyone that was part of the TAPICC program and asked them, what are the use cases, right? And from that, tried to model some generic, abstract enough, not so abstract that it can be part of the unnecessary variation problem, right? But standard enough to where we can model what everyone is doing or would imagine that they were doing. And yeah, we've had to go back to the drawing board with some of this stuff to try and be able to model what people are trying to do. But the idea is that in terms of workflow, in principle, it should be workflow agnostic, right? You should be able to model any sort of supply chain workflow that you use. You should be able to model that. So if there are things that you're like, oh, you couldn't do this, this is done in the real world, we can't model that, then we want to hear about that, right? Because then we need to make modifications to the model so it can be, so that we can support it. I mean, that's the idea, is we want to, there's some kind of tension, I think, between standardization and and innovation in a way, right? Because there's ways that you can do things that may not be supported by your standard, but that's all about the detail of how good your standard is. A good standard will support novel ways to do things while still allowing the standard to be the center of gravity in which.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the nature of almost all tools that are modeling processes that you end up having to change your organization to fit what the tool can do, not having tools that just support what different organizations do. That's just been a historic fact. But the other question I had was, what kind of roles do the people who participate in this have? Are they engineers, designers, localization managers? Because I think that's certainly going to be a very big influence on the approach you take.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have academics. We have people who own or work for translation management systems. I mean, the group I work with is mostly engineers. Yeah, I mean, you can see exactly who's a member of the group. I think we have a good mix of people from the localization industry. Again, I think what we need more of is representation from the content management side of the fence. But.
That one's closer.
So let's say that the product / deliverable is ready to go, enough people have bought into it. Who is going to be the entity that owns this and maintains it?
Yeah, no, I think, so the product that this creates is not going to be a product in the sense it's not like a platform, right? It's going to be a REST specification and a set of recommendations, best practices, a set of documentation. I mean, I would assume that it will belong to Gala, right? And this is part of the legal framework, is that things that are created within that are part of or open source, right? Or they're in the public domain. So nothing in here represents proprietary intellectual property. I'm not sure if I'm addressing the thrust of your question. I mean, some of this will maybe graduate into like being an OASIS standard, right? Where it becomes, there again, still part of the public domain.
If I may ask one more question.
Sure.
Do you have any plans to integrate more CMS side feedback or?
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I think the plan, first we want to just get this standard to where we internally agree with it and are happy with it, right? And then the idea is to try and promote it, right? Including with content management, the content management world, right? Here's a set of tools and standards that enable you to have the content that's managed in your system to be more accessible globally. So I think that's the plan. Get the standard out there first, and then do the heavy lifting of trying to like evangelize and promote it.
So in the development stage, though, the current stage, do you have any plans to integrate more CMS feedback? Because as you said, content developers are very, very diverse.
Yeah.
The media types or the works they do, or even in the same industry, there are so many different tools or proprietary
We need at least a few reference implementations to begin with, right? And we've been doing it as sort of thought experiments. Like we do a lot of integration with, big CMS systems, and we're like, okay, these things have plugins right now. Those plugins connectors could be replaced with a TAPICC connector now. So we'll definitely build some of those. I mean, by we, it's like not officially part of the TAPICC program, but like RWS Moravia, for example, as part of our wanting to leverage the standard, we'll be building our own connectors using that language. Did I answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm the only one standing. People stand when you ask a question. So it's clear, and you've stated this, that you have a lot more engagement with the localization side of the equation, right? And that's seems to be the motivation, so it's understandable. On the content creation side, I've heard CMS. I haven't heard Microsoft Word. I haven't heard Wiki Editor. I haven't heard Blog Editor. I haven't heard a lot of other things that there's content is created in a gazillion different ways. So what's the plan to plug into all those other kinds of text editors?
Yeah, and when I say CMS, I really use that term very generically, right? Like I mean any system that's producing content. So I would absolutely consider like the Microsoft ecosystem to be a content management system, right? It's creating content. This is content that is part of someone's campaign or the content that they manage. So I think it's the same, right? We would expect if you're sending content out of like Microsoft Word to be localized, why shouldn't it be sent through the process as XList? Do you guys agree? Okay. I mean, you can disagree. Yeah, and I consider like digital asset management systems to be, part of the mix as well, right? Like we do want to, if we have text, we do want to try and anchor on the XList standard as much as possible. But there are other types of non-text content that has to be part of a localization, process as well. So
I have a separate question. Well, I've got the mic, and then I'll be quiet. Just an architectural question. When you're done with this, you have the standard, right? So is it the case when it's all said and done, and we have all these people who are implementing it? Is it the case that the different kinds of entities that exchange data and do different kinds of tasks all have plug compatible things where process A communicates directly with process B, or do you have something in the middle that they all communicate with and you mediate the different kinds of communications?
Hey, that's a great question, right? Like, will there be some middleware component of this, or will you have peer-to-peer TAPICC connections where one of the systems happens to be a TAPICC host? That's a great question. There are interested parties in creating some middleware model, which I think is a great idea. Otherwise, that's a great question. Who will be building the actual TAPICC hosts? I think LSPs will likely build those, right? Because they're the ones that need to receive content from CMS systems and also need to integrate with other companies in the supply chain. So, but I mean, architecturally, we're not dictating that, right? I mean, that's a who will have the impetus to sort of build the TAPICC hosts. I think that's a good question.
So it's really driven from the host, and whether that host goes through middleware or not is a secondary question. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's the standard doesn't dictate who would be the host in the mix. Would that be a middleware-based system, or would it be one of the systems? It could be any of those. I don't know how that would pan out. I think the middleware model is really compelling, right? Because but that would require a system to be basically like as a service acting as the middleware layer. I think that's to see a company try to tackle this as a service, I think would make sense, right? There's been attempts to do that in the past, like the Clay tablet was a model that was trying to solve this, right? And I think it made sense as a paradigm. I mean, I see it not unlikely that you would see another company sort of like a rise and provide that similar kind of service.
Just a final editorial comment. I know you want to have the first track pretty much finalized by March. Yeah. You want the track to have some kind of a proposed standard by March. That's great. But you're also asking for reference implementations. This is the editorial comment.
Yeah.
You will not, it's my own opinion, you will not be able to get to anything like a final standard unless or until you have multiple references. Yeah. It's gonna change.
I agree.
It's gonna change with that.
Yeah, exactly. I absolutely agree. In fact, as we're trying to build our own reference implementations, it's changing all the time. You're like, oh man, that looked really good on paper. That does not work. Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's the way I author too, right? Like I don't actually understand until I have something written out. I think it's the same thing with coding, right? You have to you have to hone it against real world practice. So yeah, if anyone wants to help build a reference implementation, right, call me. So thank you. I agree. Dun, dun, dun.
Anyone else? We don't have any more backpacks, but you know. Well, it is 8:30, and we usually start breaking it up now so we can finish the peanut butter cups and stuff. So, thank you, Jim.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.